No treatment worked. When the doctor said those words, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet. Too quiet. My name is Richard Collins. I'm 72 years old. I built 3 successful companies in the United States. I spent my entire life chasing growth, revenue, expansion, market share. I always believed that if you worked hard enough, you could fix anything. But cancer doesn't negotiate. Stage 4. The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. We've tried all standard treatment protocols. Your body isn't responding the way we hoped. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just went numb. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, IV drips, side effects, and waiting. Waiting for improvement. Waiting for hope. But every new report looked almost identical to the last. No significant change. No improvement. Just time moving forward. My hair fell out. I lost weight. I stopped recognizing the man in the mirror. People kept telling me to stay strong. But what does stay strong even mean when nothing is working? One afternoon, I was sitting in the oncology waiting room. White walls, muted television, that faint antiseptic smell in the air. Everyone there carried something heavy. Some wore it on their faces. Others hid it better. That's when I noticed her, a woman in her mid-30s. She looked exhausted. Next to her sat a small boy, maybe 6 or 7. He looked fragile. There was a hospital band around his wrist. She was holding a thick medical file. At first, I wasn't paying attention. Then I saw her quickly wipe her eyes. She didn't want anyone to notice. I looked away immediately. I had enough of my own pain. Why take on someone else's? Then the boy spoke softly. "Mom, are we going home today?" She forced a smile. "Soon, sweetheart, soon." It wasn't a real smile. It was the kind you put on when you're trying not to break. Her file slipped slightly, and I caught a glimpse of a billing statement. The number was large, very large. I told myself it wasn't my business. I was the one fighting for my life. I closed my eyes. But something wouldn't let me settle. A few minutes later, she walked up to the front desk. Her voice was low, but I could hear parts of it. "Is there any way we can arrange more time? I can't pay the full amount right now." The receptionist responded politely but firmly. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We follow policy." She nodded, walked back, sat down. She didn't cry this time. She just stared at the floor. And in that moment, I saw something familiar. Helplessness. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet defeat. And suddenly it hit me. I wasn't just losing to cancer. I had been losing to emptiness long before that. I had money. I had resources. What I didn't have was purpose. Before I could talk myself out of it, I stood up. My legs felt weak. I walked toward her. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Is everything okay?" She looked up startled. "Yes, we're fine," she replied automatically. But she wasn't fine. I turned and walked to the front desk. "I'd like to cover the child's outstanding balance," I said. "Keep it anonymous." The receptionist looked surprised. "Sir, this is a significant amount." "I understand." I signed the authorization. No announcement, no attention, just a signature. When I turned around, the woman was looking at me. She knew. Her eyes filled with tears again. "Thank you," she whispered. I simply nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. For the first time in months, I felt something different. Not physical relief, not a miracle, but a shift. That evening when I went home, my body was still weak. The disease was still there. Nothing had medically changed, but inside, something had loosened. That night, I slept. Really slept. And I didn't know it yet, but that quiet decision in a hospital waiting room was about to change far more than I ever expected. After that day, nothing changed on the outside. I was still sick. The treatments were the same. The medications didn't magically improve. But inside, something had shifted. I kept going to the hospital every week. More tests, more scans, more waiting. But the waiting felt different now. Before, I used to sit there counting time. Now, I found myself thinking about that little boy. A few days later, I was back in the same waiting room. Same white walls, same quiet tension in the air. And then I saw them again, the woman and her son. The boy looked slightly stronger. There was a little more color in his face. He noticed me, and he smiled. A small wave of his hand. I wasn't expecting that. I had wanted to stay anonymous, but sometimes gratitude recognizes you anyway. His mother walked over slowly. They told me the balance was taken care of, she said softly. I don't know how to thank you. I shook my head. You don't have to, I replied. Just focus on him. Her eyes filled with tears. He slept peacefully last night, she said, for the first time in weeks. He said he feels like he has a chance. A chance. That word stayed with me. Later that week, I had another scan scheduled. I wasn't expecting anything new. I had already accepted that my condition wasn't improving. The doctor reviewed the images carefully. He leaned closer to the screen, then leaned back, then forward again. Richard, he said slowly, this is interesting. My stomach tightened. The tumor growth has slowed down. Some areas are stable. This is not what we expected. I stared at him. We're seeing reduced progression, he continued. It's not a full reversal, but the disease isn't advancing the way it was. For the first time in months, there was movement in the right direction. I walked out of the hospital that day feeling confused. The treatment hadn't changed, so what had? At home, I sat quietly and thought about it. Before that waiting room moment, I had been consumed by fear. Every thought was about me, my pain, my timeline. But the day I chose to help someone else, something inside me softened. I started reading about stress, about cortisol levels, about how emotional states affect immune response. There was research. There were studies. Hope and purpose can influence the body, not magically, but measurably. A week later, I contacted the hospital's social services department. Are there other families struggling with treatment costs, I asked? There was a pause. Yes, the coordinator said quietly. More than you would think. I'd like to create a fund, I said, anonymous, for pediatric cases first. She was silent for a moment. That would change lives, she replied. I realized something then. For the first time since my diagnosis, I wasn't obsessing over survival. I was thinking about impact. My next few medical reports continued to show stabilization. Nothing dramatic, but steady improvement. The doctor remained cautious, yet even he admitted, your body is responding better now. One afternoon he asked me directly, have you made any lifestyle changes recently? I thought about it. I stopped living like I was already gone, I said, and I started living like I still mattered. He smiled slightly. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Months passed. I wasn't declared cured, but I was no longer deteriorating. I had more energy, more clarity, more peace. The illness hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined me. And deep down, I knew something important. It wasn't just the medication working, it was purpose. And that realization was only the beginning. Time moved quietly. Weeks turned into months. I still went to the hospital, still sat in those same chairs, still waited for my name to be called. But something was different. The disease was no longer racing forward. It had slowed, stabilized, not gone, but no longer winning. One afternoon, my doctor closed my file and looked at me carefully. "Richard, we're calling this remarkable stabilization. Your condition is more controlled than we expected at this stage. This doesn't happen in every case." I nodded slowly. Months earlier, I had walked into this building expecting an ending. Now, I was walking in with something else. Hope. Not loud hope, not reckless optimism, just steady, grounded hope. I continued seeing the woman and her son occasionally. The boy looked stronger each time. One day he walked up to me on his own. "Mom says you helped us," he said. I smiled gently. "We all help each other," I replied. I don't know how much he understood, but I could see light in his eyes. And somehow, that light kept reaching me. The hospital fund grew quietly. More families were supported. More treatments continued. I never asked for names. I never needed recognition. Sometimes a social worker would simply say, "Another child was able to continue care because of the fund." That sentence meant more than any business award I had ever received. One evening, I sat alone in my backyard. The air was calm. The sky was clear. And I asked myself something honest. What if I had looked away that day in the waiting room? What if I had told myself it wasn't my problem? Maybe I would still be alive today, but I would still be empty. The truth is, cancer didn't break me first. Emptiness did. Living only for myself had drained me long before the diagnosis. And the moment I chose to step outside my own fear, something shifted. Not just emotionally, physically. I'm not claiming a miracle. I'm not saying kindness is a cure. But I am saying this. When I stopped obsessing over how much time I had left and started focusing on how much I could give, my fear loosened its grip. And when fear loosened, my body seemed to breathe differently. Today, I'm not perfectly healthy, but I'm not living like a dying man anymore. I'm living like someone who still matters. There's a difference. If you're listening to this and you feel like there's nothing left for you, maybe what's missing isn't more time. Maybe it's purpose. Because sometimes the way to get your life back isn't by holding on to it tighter, but by giving it away. That day in the waiting room, I didn't just pay a medical bill. I reclaimed something I didn't even realize I had lost. My reason. And maybe that was when my real healing began. If this story touched you, even a little, don't just scroll away. Take a moment. Think about someone who might need you today. And if you believe kindness still matters, hit like, share this with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Because sometimes the smallest act can change a life, maybe even yours.